The war room hummed with the ambient noise of a command center at peak efficiency, digital displays cycling through real-time intelligence feeds, encrypted communications crackling through secure channels, the low murmur of analysts cross-referencing threat assessments in adjacent stations. Grayson Blackwood stood before the central tactical display, studying 300 miles of territory with the methodical precision of a man who'd spent 2 decades in Delta Force before the change turned him into something more than human. 47 packs, 12 potential flashpoints, one aging antagonist who'd been too quiet for too long. His fingers traced coordinates on the holographic map, marking positions where Marcus Ironwood's operatives had been spotted in the past 6 weeks. The pattern was there if you knew how to read it: small movements, seemingly random, but collectively forming a reconnaissance operation that spoke to larger intentions. Kane appeared at his shoulder, moving with the silent efficiency that made him the most dangerous of the 3 Blackwood brothers. His tactical vest held the tools of his trade combat knife sidearm, 3 spare magazines, medical kit, communications array. Even in the relative safety of Obsidian Fortress, he maintained combat readiness like it was a religion. The blade in his hand caught the light as he methodically worked the whetstone across its edge. The rhythmic scraping sound had become background noise over the years, Kane's version of meditation, the only way he knew to quiet the combat reflexes that never fully shut down. Ashton occupied the intelligence station to their left, speed-reading intercepted communications with the kind of focused intensity that had made him invaluable during their Black Ops days. 3 monitors displayed simultaneous data streams, financial transactions, pack movement logs, encrypted messages their analysts had cracked in the past 48 hours. His mind processed information the way other people breathe, building connections that wouldn't be obvious to anyone else. The 3 of them had operated this way for so long that verbal communication was often unnecessary. They'd learned to read each other in combat zones where a misunderstood order meant death. The pack bonds that formed after the change only strengthened what years of operations together had already forged 3 minds functioning as tactical components of a single strategic entity. Grayson's assessment coalesced into uncomfortable certainty. He pulled up a secondary display overlaying Ironwood's movements with the evening's scheduled events. Ashton saw it at the same moment, his posture shifting into alert focus. Kane's whetstone paused mid-stroke. The Moonstone ceremony. Tonight. A small border pack strategically positioned, politically insignificant enough that standard security protocols would apply. Exactly the kind of soft target Ironwood specialized in exploiting. Grayson's operational mind began running scenarios, calculating probabilities, assessing response options. If Ironwood was planning an operation, this would be the opening. Not a direct assault, he was too smart for that, but something surgical designed to exploit a moment of perceived vulnerability. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. 5 years ago, they'd executed their own surgical operation, dismantling the old council's power structure in under 6 hours of coordinated strikes across 4 states. They'd built their reputation on precision violence applied at exactly the right moment to achieve strategic objectives. Now someone was trying to use their own playbook against them. Ironwood's been quiet for 6 weeks, Kane said, his voice carrying the flat affect of a man delivering a threat assessment rather than expressing opinion. That's not patience, that's preparation. Ashton pulled up financial records highlighting a series of transactions that had caught their analysts' attention 3 days prior. He's moved money through 7 shell companies in the past month. Small amounts difficult to track, but collectively significant. He's funding something. Grayson studied the data, his strategic mind assembling pieces into a picture he didn't like. The Moonstone ceremony is tonight. Small pack vulnerable, leadership, symbolic significance. If he moves against us, that's when. The question hung in the air between them, not whether to increase security, but by how much. Too little, and they'd be unprepared if Ironwood made his move. Too much, and they'd signal their awareness, potentially driving him deeper underground, where he'd be harder to track. Kane's blade resumed its methodical journey across the whetstone. Then we don't give him the opening. Triple the security protocols. I want eyes on every access point, snipers on every roof within 1,000 yards, and a quick reaction force staged within 2 minutes of the throne room. Ashton's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up the evening's operational parameters. The ceremony itself is low risk. Sarah Moonstone swears allegiance. We assign her a beta mate from our approved list. She returns to her pack by burrow 200 hours. Standard diplomatic protocol, 30-minute duration. Grayson enlarged the tactical display studying approaches to Obsidian Fortress with the eye of someone planning both defense and assault simultaneously. His 20 years of military service before the change had taught him to think like the enemy, to see vulnerabilities from an attacker's perspective. Standard protocol assumes standard threats. Ironwood doesn't operate standard. He highlighted 3 potential infiltration routes, that their current security posture didn't adequately cover service tunnels dating back to the fortress's original construction, ventilation systems large enough for human-sized infiltrators, blind spots in their camera coverage, where the old stone architecture created interference. Kane absorbed the information with tactical efficiency, already calculating countermeasures. I'll position teams to cover those gaps. Ironwood's smart enough to know our standard protocols. We need to be operating at wartime readiness. Ashton pulled up another data stream, this one showing pack movements across their territory over the past 72 hours. There's another complication. Sarah Moonstone turns 18 at midnight tonight, exactly when first heat cycles typically begin for Omegas her age. The implications settled over the war room like a tactical fog. An Omega in first heat represented a biological vulnerability that no amount of training could fully overcome. The physiological response was hardwired into their species' overwhelming need, compromised decision-making vulnerability to any nearby unmated alpha. If the ceremony proceeded as planned and Sarah's heat began during or immediately after, they'd have a diplomatic nightmare. An Omega in heat couldn't provide meaningful consent to mate assignment. Their own Omega protection laws regulations they'd fought hard to implement 5 years ago would prevent them from proceeding with the standard ceremony. Worse, every unmated male in the throne room would scent her vulnerability. Their biology would respond with aggressive possessiveness that could turn a routine diplomatic function into a violent confrontation. Grayson studied the intelligence brief on Sarah Moonstone with increased attention. The file was surprisingly detailed for someone so young. Military father force recon before the change killed in action 5 years ago during the final battles that brought the Trinity to power. Mother died in the same engagement. Sarah had been 13 years old when she'd effectively taken control of her pack's day-to-day operations, guided by her mother's former advisors, but making the actual strategic decisions. 7 years of successfully leading a depleted pack on a vulnerable border. That wasn't luck. That was genuine tactical competence. The psychological profile compiled by their intelligence analysts painted a picture of someone trained from childhood to think strategically. Her father had apparently treated her education like officer training, studying military history, learning to assess terrain, understanding logistics and supply chain management, developing the kind of disciplined mindset that separated competent leaders from those who merely held titles. At 18, she'd be the youngest pack alpha to formally swear allegiance to the Trinity. Most packs were led by wolves in their 30s or 40s with decades of experience to draw on. Sarah had 7 years of crisis management and survival tactics. Ashton voiced what they were all thinking. If her heat starts during the ceremony, we'll need to abort. Get her to secure quarters, provide medical suppressants if she consents, and reschedule for after her cycle completes. The political optics aren't ideal, but they're better than violating our own protection laws. Kane's operational mind was already gaming out worst-case scenarios. And if Ironwood knows about the timing, if he's planning to exploit exactly this kind of biological vulnerability, the question opened darker possibilities. Ironwood had spent 5 years studying their operations, learning their protocols, understanding their weaknesses. He'd survived this long because he was patient and thorough. If he'd identified Sarah's age and calculated the probability of first heat coinciding with the ceremony, he might see it as a perfect opportunity to create chaos. An Omega in heat trapped in a throne room full of unmated males with the Trinity Kings forced to either violate their own laws or show weakness by aborting a formal ceremony. The political ammunition alone would be valuable to someone trying to destabilize their rule. Grayson made his decision with the kind of decisive authority that came from years of command responsibility. We proceed with the ceremony, but prepare for immediate evacuation if necessary. Medical team on standby with suppressants and private quarters secured. Security at wartime readiness. And I want intelligence assets focused on any Ironwood movement in the next 6 hours. If he's planning something, he'll need to position his people before the ceremony begins. Ashton's fingers moved across multiple keyboards, simultaneously implementing the orders through their secure command network. His ability to coordinate complex operations from a single station had made him invaluable during their military days and remained crucial to managing a territory this large. Teams are being briefed now. ETA for full operational readiness is 90 minutes. Kane stood sliding his knife into its sheath with practiced ease. I'll personally oversee perimeter security. If anyone tries to breach our defenses tonight, they'll be doing it over my corpse. The words weren't bravado. They were tactical assessment. Kane had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 years of classified operations that officially never happened, and 5 years of managing security for the most politically volatile werewolf territory in North America. He was very, very good at not dying. Grayson studied the tactical display one final time, searching for variables they might have missed. Vulnerabilities they hadn't adequately addressed, contingencies that needed additional preparation. His strategic mind ran through scenarios like a computer processing combat simulations. If this happens, then this response. If that variable changes, then this adjustment. 20 years of military service had taught him that plans never survived first contact with the enemy. The key was building enough flexibility into your operations that you could adapt when reality inevitably diverged from projections. What none of them anticipated, what no amount of tactical planning could prepare them for, was that the real threat tonight wouldn't come from Marcus Ironwood's operatives or political maneuvering or security breaches. It would come from biology itself. Sarah Moonstone stood in her chambers 300 miles away, pressing her back against cool stone walls and trying to breathe through a fever that shouldn't exist. Not now, not tonight, not when everything she'd worked for over the past 7 years depended on the next 6 hours proceeding exactly according to plan. The heat had started subtly 3 hours ago, a warmth in her core that could have been stress or anxiety or any number of things. She dismissed it, focused on final preparations for the ceremony, reviewed her talking points for the formal oath, mentally prepared herself for whatever political maneuvering the Trinity Kings might employ. But the warmth had spread through her limbs, across her skin, settling between her thighs with an ache that was becoming impossible to ignore. Her wolf, usually a quiet presence in the back of her consciousness, had suddenly woken up and started demanding things that Sarah's rational mind absolutely could not accommodate right now. She understood the biological mechanics. Every Omega knew what to expect from their first heat. The overwhelming need, the desperate ache, the way rational thought got buried under layers of instinct, demanding an alpha's touch, an alpha's not, an alpha's claim. What she hadn't expected was the timing. First heats typically began within hours of an Omega's 18th birthday, yes, but she wasn't 18 yet. Not for another 9 hours. This was too early, too inconvenient, too catastrophically timed to be anything but the universe's sense of humor. Sarah had never believed in fate or destiny or divine intervention. Her father had trained her to think tactically, to assess situations based on data and probability rather than superstition. But standing in her chambers with heat burning through her body and a critical ceremony beginning in 3 hours, she was starting to reconsider her relationship with the concept of cosmic timing. Her phone buzzed. Elena Rivers' best friend since childhood beta warrior, who'd stood beside her through every crisis, currently 300 miles away at Obsidian Fortress as part of the Moonstone delegation that had traveled ahead to handle preliminary protocol. The message was characteristically direct. Carriage arrives in 20 minutes. You ready? Sarah stared at her phone, calculating options with the same tactical mindset her father had drilled into her from childhood. She could abort, send word that she was ill, reschedule the ceremony, avoid the catastrophic vulnerability of presenting herself to 3 of the most powerful alphas in North America while in first heat. But aborting meant violating treaty obligations. The ceremony had to occur on her 18th birthday. That was the requirement. Missing it would technically put Moonstone Pack in breach of their agreement with the Trinity, potentially costing them the protection and resources they desperately needed. Her pack, 47 wolves who depended on her decisions, families who trusted her to keep them safe, children who deserved to grow up with full bellies and secure borders. Everything she'd fought for since she was 13 years old. She couldn't sacrifice that because of inconvenient biology. Sarah typed her response with trembling fingers. Heat started early. Still going. No other choice. Elena's reply came through almost immediately, three words that somehow conveyed both horror and grim determination. Oh shit. Okay. Then after a pause that lasted just long enough for Elena to process tactical implications, I'll position myself near the exits. If things go sideways, we extract immediately. Trinity protection laws should cover you. They can't proceed with mate assignment if you're in heat. Worst case, you do the oath and we get you out. The logic was sound. The Trinity Kings had built their reputation partly on progressive Omega protection policies that would have been considered radical under the old council. Any sexual contact required clear, unambiguous consent from an Omega who wasn't biologically compromised. An Omega in heat couldn't provide that consent. Their biology made rational decision-making essentially impossible. So the worst case was a political embarrassment. She'd enter the throne room, her heat would become immediately obvious to every werewolf present, and the ceremony would be aborted until after her cycle completed. Awkward, yes. Humiliating, probably. But survivable. The alternative, staying home and violating treaty obligations, carried consequences she couldn't accept. The carriage ride became a test of endurance. Every bump in the road sent shockwaves through her hypersensitive body. The guard's sense muted by the partition between passenger compartment and driver's area, but still present, made her wolf pace and whine with frustration. None of them were right, weren't what she needed, but her heat didn't care about compatibility. It just wanted an alpha, any alpha, to ease the ache that was becoming unbearable. Sarah pressed her legs together, trying to find some relief, but the friction only made things worse. She could feel her arousal soaking through her undergarments, could smell her own scent intensifying in the enclosed space. Her skin felt like it was on fire, every nerve ending, screaming for touch that she absolutely could not seek out. The fortress appeared in the distance, obsidian fortress named for the black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The structure dominated the landscape, built on high ground that provided tactical advantages, with walls thick enough to withstand artillery and sightlines that would make any assault a nightmare. Her father had taught her to assess military installations with a professional eye. Obsidian Fortress was one of the most defensible positions in North America, chosen specifically because the Trinity Kings understood that power needed to be backed by the ability to hold ground against any challenge. The carriage passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one more stringent than the last. Guards examined credentials, ran scanners coordinated with command centers deeper in the fortress. The security level was significantly higher than she'd expected for a routine ceremony, almost like they were preparing for actual combat operations. Her tactical mind registered that detail even through the fog of heat. Something was happening beyond just her ceremony. Some threat assessment that had triggered wartime protocols. The carriage finally stopped in a courtyard deep within the fortress complex. Through her window, Sarah could see dozens of guards in tactical positions, snipers on rooftops, quick reaction teams, staged near entrances, a level of military readiness that suggested imminent threat response. The door opened. A female beta she didn't recognize stood waiting, professional demeanor, carefully neutral expression, clearly briefed on Sarah's condition. "Miss Moonstone, I'm Morgan Chase. I'll be escorting you to the throne room. The Trinity Kings are waiting." Sarah climbed out of the carriage on shaking legs, grateful when Morgan's hand steadied her without making it obvious. The other woman's touch was brief, professional, just enough to prevent her from stumbling in front of the dozens of guards watching the arrival. The walk through Obsidian Fortress felt surreal. Endless corridors of black stone torches casting dancing shadows, the oppressive atmosphere designed to intimidate anyone brought here to face the Trinity's judgment. Saral had studied the fortress's history during her preparations, knew that these halls had witnessed the execution of old council members who'd been found guilty of corruption, had hosted negotiations that reshaped territorial boundaries, had served as the command center for military operations spanning half the continent. Power lived in these walls, real tangible power that could crush her pack without breaking stride. And she was about to walk into the throne room, the heart of that power, while barely able to think straight through her heat. Morgan guided her through a final series of chambers that grew progressively more opulent. Rich tapestries depicting battles and coronations. Torches and iron sconces. Everywhere the weight of history, of authority, of three Alpha Kings who'd spent 5 years proving they were the most dangerous predators in North America. "We're here." Morgan's voice carried something that might have been genuine concern. "I'm required to announce you and then leave. After that, you'll be alone with them. Are you certain you want to proceed?" Sarah met the other woman's eyes drawing on reserves of strength she wasn't sure she actually possessed. I'm certain. Morgan nodded once, then pushed open massive double doors that led to the throne room itself. The space stole Sarah's breath. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow high above. Three thrones dominated a raised dais at the far end, positioned to give their occupants complete tactical overview of anyone who entered. And rising from those thrones were three men who made every instinct Sarah possessed scream danger. The Blackwood brothers. Grayson, Ashton, Kane, identical triplets in that uncanny way where even small differences became impossible to detect at first glance. Tall, powerfully built, moving with the kind of predatory grace that marked apex predators who'd never known defeat. But it was their eyes that held her frozen. Silver, all three sets focused on her with an intensity that made her knees weak, and her wolf surged forward with recognition that shouldn't exist. The mate bond slammed into her chest like a physical impact. Not one bond, three. Three separate threads of connection wrapped around her heart and pulled tight, binding her to these strangers with a certainty that defied every tactical assessment she'd ever made. Her wolf sang with desperate joy, "Mate, mate, mate," while her rational mind tried to process an impossibility. This couldn't be happening. The statistical probability of triple mate bonds was so low, it might as well be zero. The last recorded case had been 80 years ago. It was the kind of thing that existed in historical records, not real life. But her body didn't care about statistics. Her Omega nature recognized these three alphas as belonging to her, as being meant for her, with a conviction that overrode every logical objection her mind could produce. No, she heard herself whisper, horror flooding through her, even as arousal spiked to nearly unbearable levels. This isn't Sarah Moonstone," Morgan announced formally, oblivious to the catastrophe unfolding. "Daughter of the late Alpha Marcus Moonstone, here to swear allegiance on her 18th birthday as required by treaty." Then Morgan was gone, the doors closing behind her with echoing finality. The ancient clock tower began its midnight chime, 12 deep tones, marking Sarah's 18th birthday, arriving at the exact moment she faced three kings who would reshape her entire world. The timing felt less like coincidence than cosmic orchestration. She stood alone in the throne room with three kings who were looking at her like they wanted to devour her. Her body burning with heat, her heart screaming with newly formed mate bonds, every instinct demanding she submit to these alphas who couldn't possibly be hers. The one in the center spoke first, his voice controlled, but carrying an edge that made her shiver despite the fever consuming her. "My name is Grayson Blackwood, and these are my brothers, Ashton and Kane. We are the Trinity Kings, and you, little Omega, have just presented yourself to us during your first heat while the mate bonds declare you ours." "Do you understand what that means?" Sarah tried to speak, to explain, to protest, but another wave of heat rolled through her before words could form. Her legs gave out, sending her crashing to her knees on cold stone body trembling with need and fear, and the overwhelming pull of three bonds that felt like they were trying to drag her toward the dais. "It means," the one on the left continued, his voice rougher than Grayson's, "that you belong to us, that your Omega nature recognizes us as your alphas, that your body is crying out for our touch. I'm Kane, by the way, the one who's going to enjoy watching you struggle with this." The third brother moved then, descending from the dais with predatory precision that made Sarah's breath catch. He circled her, slowly staying just out of reach, and she could feel his gaze on her like a physical touch. "I'm Ashton," he said softly, his voice carrying a gentleness the others lacked. "And I think our little mate is terrified. Look at her trembling, caught between heat and pride, trying to maintain dignity when her body is screaming for relief." He crouched to her level, silver eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made thinking impossible. "You can feel it, can't you? The bonds pulling you toward us. Your Omega instincts demanding submission. The heat building until you think you'll burn alive if we don't touch you." Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze, to push words past the desire clogging her throat, even as her rational mind screamed that engaging with them right now was tactical suicide. "I came here to swear allegiance and return to my pack. Not to be claimed by three kings who think they own me because of some biological accident." The moment the words left her mouth, she knew they were a mistake. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. All three kings went very still in a way that suggested predators calculating attack vectors. Then Grayson was moving, covering the distance between them, so fast she barely registered the motion. His hand fisted in her hair, forcing her head back, exposing her throat in a position of complete vulnerability. Biological accident, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Is that what you think the mate bond is? A random quirk of chemistry that means nothing. His grip tightened just slightly, not painful, but absolutely controlling. The moon goddess herself declared that you were made for us, that we were made for you, that your purpose in this life is to stand beside us and bear our heirs. And you call it an accident. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The heat made resistance almost impossible, her body begging her to submit, to accept, to make the ache stop. But 7 years of leading her pack had taught her that showing weakness invited exploitation. I have a pack to lead, responsibilities. A life that doesn't include being shared between three alphas like some prize. You had a pack to lead, Kane corrected from the dais, his tone almost bored. Past tense. The moment those bonds formed, your life changed. You're ours now, which means Moonstone Pack is ours by extension. We'll assign someone competent to manage it while you learn to be the queen you were destined to become. Ashton's hands settled on her shoulder, warmed through the fabric of her dress. The good news is we're not complete monsters. We understand this is overwhelming. That your first heat caught you by surprise. That finding three mates instead of one is terrifying. So we're going to give you a choice. Grayson released her hair, stepping back just enough to give her space to breathe. His expression remained controlled, but she could see the tension in his posture, alpha instincts warring with whatever strategic calculations he was running. Here's your choice, Omega. You can accept the bonds now. Let us help you through your heat. Begin the claiming process that will bind us together permanently. Or you can fight it. Try to return to your pack. Attempt to ignore three mate bonds that will only grow stronger with every passing day while your heat consumes you. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Either way, you end up ours, but one path is significantly less painful than the other. Sarah looked between the three of them, seeing the absolute certainty in their expressions. They truly believed she had no choice, that the mate bonds trumped everything else, her autonomy, her pack, her entire future. And the worst part was that her body agreed with them. The heat was building toward unbearable. Her wolf was howling for them to touch, her claim, her make the ache stop. Every instinct she possessed was screaming that these three powerful alphas were exactly what she needed. But she was her father's daughter, raised to value independence and tactical thinking over submission. Taught that leaders never showed weakness, never surrendered, never accepted defeat without exhausting every other option first. So instead of accepting or refusing, Sarah pushed herself to her feet on shaking legs, drawing on reserves of strength that shouldn't exist but somehow did. If I'm supposedly your mate, your queen, then I should have equal say in how this works. Her voice was steadier than she'd expected, cutting through the tension in the throne room. So here's my counteroffer. We complete the political ceremony I came here for. I return to my pack. And we all take time to figure out what these bonds actually mean before anyone makes claims or decisions that can't be undone. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the fortress seemed to disappear, leaving just four people in a massive space facing decisions that would reshape multiple lives. Then unexpectedly, Ashton laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm and appreciative, breaking the tension like a blade through silk. She's got fire, this one. I like it. Grayson's expression didn't change, his strategic mind clearly running calculations. Your counteroffer is rejected. You're not leaving this palace while in heat. It's not safe, not for you, not for every unmated male who would catch your scent and lose control trying to reach you. Our laws protect Omegas, but biology is biology. You stay here where you're protected. And as for time, Kane added, descending from the dais to join his brothers, you can have all the time you need after we deal with your heat, because watching you suffer through it alone, when we could ease it, would be cruelty. And despite what you might think, we're not cruel to what's ours. The heat chose that moment to spike a wave of needs so intense that Sarah actually cried out, her careful control shattering. Her legs gave out again, and this time Ashton caught her, lifting her against his chest with effortless strength. She should have protested, should have fought, should have maintained the independence she'd been defending seconds ago. But contact felt so good. His scent wrapped around her pine and winter air, and something uniquely him. His alpha energy soothed the desperate ache just slightly, giving her brain enough relief to form coherent thought. Please, she heard herself whisper, hating how weak she sounded, but unable to stop the words. I can't think like this. Everything's too much. Then stop thinking, Ashton murmured against her hair. Let us take care of you. Let your body have what it needs. We'll figure out politics and power dynamics later. Right now you're in heat, and we're your mates. Nothing else matters. Grayson moved closer, his hands settling on her cheek with surprising gentleness. The controlled alpha who demanded her submission had shifted into something different, still authoritative, still commanding, but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. We're not going to force you, his silver eyes demanded honesty. If you truly can't accept this, if being ours is genuinely unbearable, we'll find a way through your heat that doesn't involve claiming. Medical suppressants exist. We can keep you comfortable without compromising your consent. He paused, studying her face with intensity that suggested he was reading far more than just her surface expressions. But Sarah, look at me. Tell me your Omega doesn't recognize us. Tell me your wolf isn't begging you to submit. Tell me you don't feel the rightness of these bonds, even through your fear. She couldn't, because they would be lies. Her wolf was screaming yes with every fiber of her being. Her Omega nature pulled her toward all three of them with a force that felt irresistible. And underneath the fear and anger and desperate desire to maintain control was a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. These men, these dangerous, powerful kings she'd known for less than 10 minutes, felt like coming home. But admitting that felt like surrender, like giving up everything she'd planned for her life, like acknowledging that 7 years of fighting to maintain her pack's independence had just become meaningless because biology decided she belonged somewhere else. I don't want to lose myself, she finally said, her voice breaking. I don't want to become just an Omega, just a mate, just a womb for the next generation of heirs. I wanted to be more than that. Then be more, Kane said simply. He'd moved close enough that she was surrounded now. Ashton holding her, Grayson's hand on her face, Kane's presence at her back. 3 alphas caging her in, but somehow not making her feel trapped. Just protected. We're not asking you to be less than you are, Kane continued. We're offering you the chance to be everything you're meant to be. A leader, yes, but also a queen, a mate, the other half of 3 souls that have been incomplete without you. His hand settled on her lower back, and even through the dress, she could feel the heat of his touch. We've been ruling for 5 years, waiting for mate bonds to form with someone worthy of standing beside us. Do you think we want a weak Omega who will just nod and agree with everything we say? We want a partner, someone strong enough to challenge us, smart enough to see what we miss, brave enough to call us out when we're wrong. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. We want you, Sarah, not some idealized version you, with all your fire and pride and stubborn refusal to make this easy. The woman who kept her pack alive through 7 years of hell. The soldier who was trained by a Force Recon veteran and thinks tactically even when heat is destroying her rational thought. That's who we want standing beside us. The words undermined something in her defenses. They weren't promising to diminish her. They were acknowledging exactly what she feared and offering something different: partnership. Instead of possession, collaboration instead of control. But could she trust it? Could she trust them? Another wave of heat rolled through her, stronger this time, and she whimpered despite her best efforts to suppress the sound. The need was becoming unbearable. Her body was screaming for relief that only an alpha could provide. And she had 3 alphas surrounding her, all of them radiating desire and control, and the promise of satisfaction if she'd just stop fighting and accept what they were offering. Ashton shifted his grip, adjusting her weight so he could carry her more easily. Our private chambers are through here, he said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control while holding an Omega in heat. You need to decide now, Sarah. Let us help you through this heat. Accept that you're ours and we're yours. Begin building whatever this relationship is going to be. He paused, looking at his brothers before continuing. Or we find suppressants to mute your heat, give you space, and watch you suffer because you're too proud to accept what we're offering. Your choice. But you need to make it now, because if we don't do something soon, this heat is going to tear you apart. Sarah's tactical mind tried to process options, to run scenarios, to calculate outcomes. But rational thought was slipping away, buried under layers of need that made strategy essentially impossible. The heat was unbearable. The mate bonds were pulling so hard it physically hurt to resist. And these three alphas were offering relief, protection, partnership, everything her body and wolf, and some deep part of her heart was screaming that she needed. But accepting meant surrendering control, admitting that biology had made the decision for her, acknowledging that 7 years of independence had just been preparation for the moment when she'd become what her omega nature demanded, mated, claimed and bound to alphas she barely knew. Her father's voice in her memory, delivered during a training session years ago. Sometimes the only way to win is to change the terms of engagement. If you can't win the battle they're offering, redefine what victory looks like. Sarah took a shaking breath, forcing words past the heat, trying to steal her ability to think. I'll accept help through the heat. Each word required immense effort. But I'm not promising anything beyond that. We're not mates until I say we are. You can't just declare ownership and expect me to fall in line. Silent communication passed through pack bonds, immediate tactical consensus forming between the three brothers without a single word spoken aloud. Grayson nodded slowly, his strategic mind clearly working through implications. Agreed. We help you through your heat. No claiming bites, those marks are permanent, and we won't make them without your explicit consent afterward. No permanent bonds beyond what the goddess already forged. After the heat passes and your head is clear, we talk. We negotiate. We figure out how this works with your pack, your independence, all the complications. He paused, his tone shifting into something that carried command authority. But during your heat, little Omega, you submit. You let us touch, you taste, you feel you. You accept what your body needs without fighting every step of the way. We'll respect your boundaries, but you have to let us help you. Deal. The bluntness of his words made her shiver, heat pooling low in her belly even as some part of her mind recognized the tactical genius of the offer. He was giving her an out, a way to accept help through the immediate crisis without committing to permanent bonds. Time to assess whether the mate bonds were real or just heat-induced biology. It was more than she'd expected, more than she deserved, probably given that she'd walked into their throne room and immediately insulted them by calling the mate bonds an accident. Deal, she whispered, not sure if she was making the best decision of her life or the worst mistake possible. Ashton carried her toward a door behind the thrones that she hadn't noticed before. The shift from throne room to private chambers was jarring, going from oppressive stone and shadows to a space that was warm, comfortable, designed for living rather than intimidation. The bedroom dominated the space, featuring the largest bed Sarah had ever seen. It had to be custom-made to accommodate three massive alphas piled high with pillows and furs that spoke to both comfort and wealth. The sight of it made reality crash down on her. She was going to have sex with three men, three alphas, three kings, during her first heat when she'd never even been kissed. The panic must have shown on her face because Ashton set her down gently on the bed's edge and crouched in front of her, his silver eyes holding concern rather than the predatory hunger she'd expected. Breathe. His voice was soft but commanding. We're not going to hurt you. We're not going to take more than you can give. This is about helping you through the heat, easing the pain, not conquering or claiming. You're in control here, Sarah. You say stop, we stop. You say slow or we slow down. Your comfort matters to us. But I've never, she started, then stopped, embarrassed by the admission. Never what Kane prompted, moving to sit beside her on the bed. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together in a gesture that was surprisingly gentle given his rough exterior. Never been with an alpha. Never been with anyone. Never imagined you'd lose your virginity to three men at once while burning with your first heat, all of the above. Sarah admitted, her cheeks flushing, despite the heat that was making embarrassment seem trivial. I was supposed to wait until after I was mated. It was important to me, making that choice consciously, not because my biology demanded it. And now here I am, about to let three men I've known for less than an hour touch me in ways I've never been touched. Grayson sat on her other side, effectively caging her between the three of them. The position should have felt threatening, but somehow it just felt safe, protected. Because we're your mates, he said simply. The mate bond makes this different. It's not three strangers taking advantage of an omega in heat. It's three men who were literally made for you, whose touch will feel right in ways nothing else ever could, giving you exactly what your body is crying out for. His hands settled on her thigh, warmed through the thin fabric of her dress. This is your first heat, your first time. We're going to make it good for you, Sarah. We're going to teach you what your body can do, what pleasure feels like with your mates. And tomorrow, when your head is clear, you can decide what comes next. Ashton's hand cupped her face thumb, brushing her lower lip in a touch that sent electricity straight to her core. May I kiss you? The fact that he asked, that he was giving her choice despite the heat and the bonds and his obvious desire, made something in Sarah's chest loosen. These weren't men planning to take what they wanted regardless of her consent. They were asking, negotiating, treating her like a partner even in this. Yes, she breathed. Then his mouth was on hers, gentle at first, just a soft press of lips that made her gasp. He took advantage of the opening to deepen the kiss, his tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that made heat spike through her core and her wolf howl with satisfaction. When he finally pulled back, she was breathing hard, lips swollen, body burning hotter than before. My turn, Kane said, and then he was kissing her too rougher than Ashton had been, more demanding. His teeth caught her lower lip in a way that made her whimper, the sound swallowed by his mouth as one hand fisted in her hair to hold her exactly where he wanted her. By the time he released her, Sarah was trembling, her core clenching around nothing, desperate for something she'd never experienced but needed with every fiber of her being. Then Grayson was turning her face toward him, his eyes dark with desire, but still maintaining that controlled edge that marked him as the strategist of the three. "And I make three," he murmured, before claiming her mouth with a kiss that was somehow both gentle and possessive. He kissed like he ruled with absolute authority, making it clear that she was his, even as he gave her the space to respond. When all three had kissed her, Grayson stood and began removing his formal jacket with methodical precision. "We're going to undress you now." His voice was calm, professional. "Ashton and Kane will help you out of that dress while I prepare the bed. If anything we do makes you uncomfortable, you say so immediately." "Understood." Sarah could only nod as Ashton and Kane's hands found the laces of her dress. They worked efficiently, and within moments the dress was sliding down her shoulders. Soon she wore only thin undergarments, more exposed than she'd ever been. The way all three kings looked at her made her feel more vulnerable than complete nakedness would have. Beautiful Ashton breathed, his hands skimming over her shoulders. "Look at you, little Omega. Perfect." Kane's hand settled on her bare knee, slowly sliding upward. "So soft, so responsive. I can smell how wet you are. Are you aching, Sarah?" "Yes," she admitted. "It hurts. Please, I need—" She wasn't sure how to finish that sentence, but they understood. Grayson returned to the bed now, stripped down to loose pants. "Lay back. Let us see all of you." Sarah obeyed, letting them arrange her in the center of the massive bed. They finished removing her remaining garments until she was completely bare, the heat making her too desperate for embarrassment. Grayson's hands splayed across her stomach. "We're going to touch. You taste, you make you come until the edge of your heat eases. Then once you're thinking clearly, again we'll fill you properly. Sound good?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. His hand slid lower, fingers tracing her most intimate places. "May I? Yes. Please." "Yes." Then they were everywhere, hands and mouths working in coordination. Kane moved between her legs while Ashton claimed her breasts and Grayson's fingers found her mouth. The sensations overwhelmed her, pleasure building towards something she'd never experienced. When Kane's mouth replaced his thumb, his tongue working with devastating skill while his fingers pressed inside her, Sarah screamed. Her first orgasm crashed through her with intensity that stole thought, her body convulsing with waves of pleasure. The heat eased slightly, but wasn't gone. They took their time building her up again and again until she was a writhing mess beyond coherent thought, knowing only that she needed to be filled. Grayson positioned himself between her legs first. "This might hurt initially. Your heat will help, but you're taking your first cock. If it's too much, tell me." Then he was pushing inside, thick and unrelenting. She felt herself stretching, the intrusion overwhelming. It burned, walking the line between pain and pleasure. "Breathe, let your body adjust. You're doing so well." The praise made her clench around him. He groaned, then began to move slow, deep thrusts that had her gasping. The others were beside her, hands everywhere, mouths claiming hers. When she came, she felt his knot swelling, locking them together as his release flooded her. The heat eased significantly, finally satisfied. But her body was already turning toward Ashton and Kane. They took turns throughout the night, each nodding her multiple times. Somewhere between gentle claiming and rough dominance, in perfect balance, Sarah stopped at fighting. She simply existed in the pleasure, in the rightness of being with her mates. When dawn broke and her heat finally eased into satisfied exhaustion, she lay tangled between three powerful bodies, thoroughly claimed even without permanent marks. Something fundamental had shifted. She was theirs. They were hers. And whatever came next would have to account for that truth. Sarah woke to the sensation of being studied. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways, muscles sore from exertion, a deep satisfaction that spoke to how thoroughly she'd been claimed. The heat had receded, leaving her mind blessedly clear. But that clarity brought unwelcome awareness of exactly what she'd done. The panic must have manifested in her breathing because Ashton stirred beside her, his arm tightening around her waist. Easy, I can feel your anxiety through the bond. Whatever you're processing, we can work through it together. I need to go home. The words came out desperate. My pack, they expected me back hours ago. Elena will think something terrible happened. Something terrible did happen, Kane said with amusement. You met your mates and spent the night being thoroughly worshipped. Absolutely catastrophic. The casual dismissal made anger spike through exhaustion. This isn't funny. I have responsibilities, people depending on me. Your pack is fine, Grayson said calmly. We sent word you were remaining as our honored guest. They probably assume you're negotiating treaties. He paused, expression serious. What they don't know is that you're now mated to 3 kings and will never be returning to Moonstone permanently. Sarah's wolf bristled at the presumption. You can't just decide that. I have a life, responsibilities. I'm not abandoning my pack to play queen. You're not abandoning anyone, Ashton said gently. But the mate bond isn't optional. You're ours now, which means you belong here. Your pack will be protected, but you personally stay with your mates. Last night you said I'd have equal say. Sarah protested. Was that just tactical maneuvering? No, Kane said flatly. It was truth. But equal say doesn't mean you get to leave us. It means we figure out together how to make this work. Sarah wrapped the sheet around herself like armor. Then let's actually negotiate. I'll stay part-time, but I need weekly visits to Moonstone minimum. I won't maintain connection through monthly visits. Wordless coordination through pack bonds. She was learning to read the subtle shifts that indicated consensus. Agreed, Grayson said. Weekly trips with appropriate security. What else? I want real responsibilities, not ceremonial duties. If I'm your partner, I want actual authority. Equal voice in decisions, genuine power to implement changes. Done, Ashton said immediately. You'll have full access to intelligence networks, participation in all councils, authority to propose reforms. Your insights from leading a small pack will be valuable. The claiming bites, Sarah continued. You said no permanent marks without consent. I want 6 weeks minimum before we discuss this. 6 weeks, Grayson agreed. You'll live here, work with us, learn what this partnership looks like. At the end, if you genuinely believe the bonds are just biology and want to walk away, we'll discuss options. Though mate bonds typically only grow stronger. And there's something else, Kane added. The rest of the werewolf world will learn about these bonds quickly. Some will celebrate. Others will see you as our weakness, a vulnerability to exploit. He leaned forward. Your life just became dangerous. Assassination attempts, kidnapping plots, political machinations. You'll need guard security training, constant vigilance, and you'll need to trust us about risks. I can handle danger, Sarah said. I was raised to lead. I know how to fight. Your definition of danger and ours are very different, Grayson said bluntly. We're talking about Marcus Ironwood, the man who's been running operations against us for 5 years. He'll see you as the perfect target. Who is he? Sarah asked. Old council member who barely escaped execution, Ashton explained, pulling up a tablet with surveillance photos and intelligence. He's been running a long-game operation ever since, never quite crossing into treason, but constantly probing for weaknesses. We've disrupted 17 of his operations over 5 years, but he's patient and smart. He's got sympathizers in maybe a dozen packs. Alphas who preferred the old system. He's dangerous because he's not reckless. He's a tactician playing a years-long game. Sarah studied the intelligence. So what's his operational pattern? How does he typically move? All three kings looked surprised at her immediate shift to strategic analysis. Surgical strikes disguised as accidents, Grayson said with approval. Uses cutouts, false flags, deniable assets. Never leaves direct evidence. Then we need to draw him out, Sarah said. Make him commit where he can't maintain deniability. Force him into direct action that exposes his network. Kane smiled dangerously. You're thinking offensively. Defense only works if you can predict all attack vectors, Sarah pointed out. He's studied your protocols for 5 years. Sitting back just gives him more time. We need to change the battlefield, make him react to our moves. A knock interrupted them. Servants appeared with food clothing for Sarah and neutral expressions. Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks, but forced herself to maintain composure. If she was going to be queen, she needed to project authority. After eating, they briefed her on the afternoon's requirement, a public court assembly to announce the mate bonds. You're going to announce publicly, Sarah said, understanding the tactical necessity, to thousands of wolves who will have opinions about 3 kings mating an omega from a minor pack. Thousands, Kane confirmed. Word has spread. If we don't control the narrative rumors, will. How much time do I have? 3 hours. The preparation was intense. Ashton walked her through intelligence files on key court members, alphas controlling major packs, elders holding historical authority, political factions formed around various policies. Kane reviewed security protocols with military precision, where exits were, how to signal threats, quick reaction forces staged nearby, hand signals for immediate extraction. Grayson provided strategic overview. What the announcement meant politically, how it would reshape alliances, why timing mattered. When servants arrived with clothing silver and white formal but projecting authority, Sarah began to feel like she could handle this. She knew key players understood the political landscape had contingency plans. The throne room was packed when they entered. Sarah walked between Grayson and Ashton with Kane behind in protective formation. Every eye tracked their progress. Grayson's voice carried absolute authority. Last night, the mate bonds formed between myself, my brothers, and Sarah Moonstone. The moon goddess has chosen her as our mate, our equal, our Luna. Any wolf who wishes to maintain good standing will treat her with respect due to her position. Any who threaten her will face our wrath. Shockwaves rippled through the crowd. An older alpha stepped forward. The Moonstone Pact brings no significant alliance, no military strength. What justifies elevating a minor pack's daughter to queen? Before the kings could respond, Sarah stepped forward. You want to question divine selection? Question me instead. Her command voice carried through the space. I came expecting a simple ceremony. Instead, I found 3 mate bonds that shouldn't exist. Yes, I was in heat, but these 3 men gave me choices at every turn. Negotiated terms. Prioritized my consent over biology. She paused, meeting eyes throughout the crowd. You think this is about resources? I'm a Force Recon veteran's daughter. I've led my pack since 13. I don't need 3 kings to give me power. I already have it. What the mate bond gives me is allies, partners. And what it gives this Northern Territories is a queen who understands small packs, who knows how to fight, who won't make decisions from privilege. The response was mixed, but she'd made her point. Then an elderly woman stepped forward, white hair, weathered features, but sharp eyes. I am Elder Victoria Stoneheart of the Clearwater Pack. My grandmother was the last Omega to bear 3 mates 80 years ago before such bonds were forbidden. She addressed the assembly. The old council banned triple bonds not because they were unnatural, but because they were too powerful. An Omega with 3 alpha mates couldn't be controlled, couldn't be dominated. My grandmother's story ended in tragedy. The council had her mates killed and imprisoned her. But she told me the goddess only forges such bonds when exceptional strength is needed for exceptional challenges. Victoria fixed her gaze on Sarah. You are not an anomaly, child. You are a weapon the goddess has forged for battles yet to come. I suggest this court recognize that rather than questioning divine wisdom. The words sent ripples through the crowd, elder validation lending legitimacy, even skeptics couldn't easily dismiss. The assembly continued another hour, wolves pledging support or asking questions. Through it all, Sarah stood beside her mates, projecting confidence, understanding, perception mattered as much as reality. Near the end, a distinguished man in his 50s stepped forward. Something about him made Sarah's instincts scream danger. Marcus Ironwood Grayson said quietly, "Old council member, our persistent problem." Ironwood bowed with perfect formality. "Your Majesties, Miss Moonstone, I simply wish to express congratulations on this unprecedented development. Three mates, the goddess certainly works in mysterious ways." He paused deliberately. "I do hope the young lady is prepared for scrutiny this will bring. Not everyone will be as accepting as Elder Victoria. Many remember the old ways might view this arrangement as unnatural. I would hate for Miss Moonstone to face unnecessary challenges." "Is that a threat?" Ironwood Kane asked, voice deadly soft. "A threat, heavens no. Merely an observation." "Your concern is noted and rejected," Grayson said. "Anyone with problems can take it up with us directly. Now, unless you have substantive business, we're done." Ironwood bowed and withdrew. After the assembly dispersed, Sarah sank onto a couch. "That was brutal. You handled it well," Ashton said. "That speech about already having power, perfect positioning, and Victoria's intervention gives you legitimacy," Grayson added. "What about Ironwood?" Sarah asked. "That wasn't empty courtesy. He was probing, testing reactions, measuring whether I'm genuinely protected." Kane smiled grimly. "Exactly. Which means he's planning something." "Then we need to be ready," Sarah said. "You said he's been running operations for 5 years. What's his typical timeline?" Ashton pulled up his tablet. "Varies widely. Sometimes days, sometimes months. No consistent pattern, he adapts." "So he's tactically flexible," Sarah concluded, "which means we can't predict through patterns alone. We need to think like he thinks, identify optimal opportunities, and prepare responses." "You really do think like an operator," Grayson said. "Most queens would focus on ceremony. You're running threat assessments." "Most queens weren't raised by force recon veterans," Sarah pointed out. "My father taught me survival requires strategic thinking." "This is just a bigger battlefield." Kane moved to the wall terminal, pulling up tactical displays. "Then let's start your real education. If you're our partner, you need to understand our security architecture, intelligence networks, response protocols. Welcome to the war room, Sarah. This is where real work happens." The war room became Sarah's education ground over the following weeks. Mornings intelligence briefings with Ashton, afternoons combat training with Kane, evenings policy work with Grayson. The Northern Territories encompassed 47 packs across 6 states. Managing that complexity required constant vigilance, strategic resource allocation, tactical thinking that treated every decision as a potential domino. Sarah absorbed it with focused intensity. She learned to read territorial maps like battlefields, studied pack dynamics, identified which alphas could be trusted and which required careful handling. Kane drilled her in combat techniques with ruthless efficiency. "You're an Omega. Most threats will have size advantages. Your edge is speed, tactical, thinking, willingness to fight dirty." He demonstrated knee-disabling techniques, made her practice until movement became muscle memory. "Pretty fighting is for movies. Real combat is ending threats as quickly as possible." Understand? Sarah understood. Grayson walked her through the complex web of treaties, resource agreements, political arrangements. She learned the economics of pack management, grain, subsidies, medical distribution, infrastructure, investments. The work was exhausting and exhilarating. For the first time since her parents died, Sarah felt like she was building something larger than survival. She also began understanding her mates as individuals. Grayson was the strategist, always thinking ahead, calculating long-term implications. He carried guilt for the coup's violence, necessary evil he'd authorized, but never reconciled with. Late at night, she'd feel him tense, running through scenarios. Ashton was the conscience who'd pushed hardest for Omega protections. His intelligence work gave him insight into suffering statistics couldn't convey. He read intercepted messages about abuse, hunger struggles under corrupt leadership. Those human stories drove his policies more than abstract principles. Kane carried the most visible scars. He had nightmares, violent dreams that had him awake and armed before conscious thought. Sarah learned to wake him gently, to ground him back to reality. His gratitude showed in small gestures. Coffee prepared exactly right, training adjusted to avoid aggravating injuries, protective positioning without being obvious. And slowly, Sarah fell in love with all three of them. Not just the overwhelming mate bond connection, though that thrummed constantly. This was deeper, built on mutual respect, shared purpose, genuine partnership. They challenged her thinking, valued her input, treated her as equal in ways beyond political theater. 4 weeks after arrival, the first major test came. A territorial dispute between Riverbend and Clearwater packs had simmered for decades. Both submitted formal requests for Trinity arbitration, and Grayson assigned the case to Sarah as her first major independent decision. She threw herself into research, studying historical maps, interviewing representatives, analyzing resource distribution patterns. After 3 days, she believed she'd found a fair solution. Split the disputed territory evenly with clear demarcation and shared hunting rights. Both packs would gain defined boundaries while maintaining resource access. The Trinity approved. The decision was announced officially. Sarah felt proud. Then 5 days later, disaster struck. 3 Riverbend wolves died attempting to access hunting grounds now legally forbidden. They'd starved desperation, driving them to risk trespassing because the territory she'd allocated didn't provide adequate game during winter. The news hit like a physical blow. She'd made a catastrophic error that directly resulted in preventable deaths. Grayson found her staring at reports. 3 wolves, dead, because I didn't understand what I was doing. Her voice was flat, tactical assessment, divorcing emotion from analysis. You made an error, Grayson said. It happens to every leader. The question is, what you do next. What I do. 3 wolves are dead because I thought I was qualified. What I do is acknowledge I'm not ready. No, Grayson said firmly. What you do is take responsibility, publicly implement corrections and learn. Running doesn't bring them back. But owning your error and fixing it prevents future deaths. Ashton appeared. I've prepared briefing on what went wrong. Seasonal water sources your boundary didn't account for. If you want to address this properly, you need to understand all factors. The court will expect response, Kane added. Silence makes this worse. But how you frame it matters. This can demonstrate either incompetence or accountability. Sarah processed their words, mind slowly shifting from emotional spiral to tactical problem solving. They weren't dismissing her mistake, but they treated this as mission failure requiring adaptive response rather than complete surrender. Her father's voice, learn from every failure. The only unforgivable mistake is refusing to adapt afterward. She stood. I need to call emergency assembly, publicly acknowledge error, revoke flawed ruling and implement corrections, and compensate families. That's exactly right, Grayson said. And Sarah, this will hurt. Taking public responsibility for deaths is one of the hardest things a leader does. But it's what separates genuine leadership from people who just hold titles. The emergency assembly was brutal, standing before hundreds, many who already questioned her qualifications, admitting catastrophic failure required every ounce of discipline. I made an error in tactical assessment. Her voice carried steady authority, despite shame. In analyzing the Riverbend Clearwater dispute, I failed to properly research seasonal resource patterns. My decision resulted in unjust designation that directly contributed to 3 Riverbend wolves losing their lives. Murmurs suggested many had been waiting for exactly this failure. I am revoking my previous ruling. The boundary will be redrawn with proper analysis and consultation with experts from both packs. The families will receive full Crown support, resource allocation, guaranteed multi-territory hunting rights, and my personal commitment to prevent this from happening again. She paused, meeting eyes throughout. I'm still learning to operate at this level. I will make mistakes, but I promise I will always take responsibility. I will always prioritize mission success, which means wolf welfare over personal pride. And I will learn from every failure. The response wasn't universal approval. Many looked skeptical, some hostile. But others showed grudging respect. A leader admitting fault was rare. After the assembly, Ironwood approached with that cold smile. Quite the performance, turning catastrophic incompetence into humility display. One might think you engineered this for political effect. Though 3 dead wolves seemed steep, his implicit threat was clear. 3 wolves died because I made an error, Sarah said. That's not theater, that's tragedy. But I've corrected the mistake and compensated families. Ironwood's smile sharpened. Young leaders often make costly errors when operating beyond experience. I hope your future mistakes won't be quite so fatal. He withdrew, leaving her certain he was planning something. That night, lying between her mates, Sarah finally processed emotional weight. 3 wolves died because of me. The words came out broken. I thought my experience was enough. But I was wrong and people died because of arrogance. Ashton pulled her closer. You made a mistake, a serious one. But you handled aftermath exactly right, took responsibility, implemented corrections, compensated families. That matters. Does taking responsibility bring them back? No, Grayson said quietly. It doesn't, but it prevents future harm, which is all any leader can do after mistakes. You think we haven't made similar errors. I authorized a strike that killed civilians. Ashton's intelligence failed to catch a threat that resulted in massacre. Kane's assessment led soldiers into ambush that cost lives. He paused. We carry those deaths, learn from them, try to be better. That's all leadership is, making best decisions with available information, taking responsibility. When you fail, adapting, so failure means something. You did that today. It cost you, but you did it. The wolves who matter will respect you for owning mistakes, Kane added. The ones who use it to dismiss you were looking for excuses anyway. Focus on the mission, getting better, making fewer errors, building something worth the cost. Sarah let their words settle, slowly integrating the hard lesson. Mistakes happened. The only question was whether you learned or let them destroy you. She chose to learn. Following weeks saw Sarah attacking education with renewed intensity. If she was making decisions affecting thousands, she needed to be exponentially more thorough. She started consulting specialists before recommendations, hydrologists, ecologists, pack historians. Her second arbitration was exhaustively researched. 2 weeks studying the case before proposing solution. When implemented, both packs accepted without major complaint, not because it made everyone happy, but because it was demonstrably fair and thoroughly considered. 6 weeks after arrival, Sarah woke to find her 3 mates watching with intensity and something deeper she recognized as love. 6 weeks have passed, Grayson said. The timeline we agreed for deciding about claiming bites. We want to complete the bond mark. You permanently bind ourselves in every way possible. He paused. But only if you're ready. Only if you genuinely want this. We won't pressure you into permanent marks if you still have doubts about whether the mate bond is real or just biology. Sarah's heart hammered. The claiming bites were permanent, irreversible. Once given, she'd be bound for life. No walking away, no changing mind, no escape if things went wrong. But looking at them, at these dangerous men who'd given her choices, who'd valued her opinions, who'd shown in 1,000 ways that she mattered beyond being their mate, Sarah realized she didn't want to escape. I'm ready, she said simply. Not because 6 weeks is up, but because I've seen who you are in crisis. You gave me space to fail, to learn, to grow. You've treated me like equal partner, not trophy. And I've seen what we're building, something stronger than any of us could build alone. She met each gaze. I love you. All 3. Not just because of mate bonds, though those are real, but because of who you've proven yourselves to be. I choose this, the bond, the partnership, the mission. I choose you. The ceremony was private, just them in their chambers. They took turns, each bite sharp pain, followed by overwhelming pleasure. Grayson marked the right side of her throat, precise and controlled. Ashton claimed the left with surprising gentleness. Kane's teeth sank into her neck shoulder junction with satisfying dominance. Each formed permanent mark, visible proof of who she belonged to. Then Sarah bit each of them in return, her omega teeth sharp enough to break their skin. Her marks were smaller, but equally permanent, visible to everyone that this claiming went both ways. The completed mate bond sang through all 4 with intensity that made breathing difficult. It was right, meant to be. Whatever else happened, they belonged to each other in ways transcending politics or power. The formal mating ceremony 3 days later was witnessed by thousands. Sarah wore silver and white claiming marks, visible and proud. Her vows carried genuine conviction. I, Sarah Moonstone, accept Grayson Ashton and Kane Blackwood as my mates, my alphas, my partners in command. I vow to stand beside them in every engagement, to share intelligence and strategic burden, to rule with strength and compassion. I vow to never forget where I came from, a small pack surviving through strategy. I vow to use power I now have to ensure every wolf has protection and justice. This is my oath witnessed by the goddess and sealed by bond. Together we will complete the mission. The response was overwhelming, thousands howling approval. But in the crowd, Ironwood watched with calculating eyes and a smile promising his operation was about to begin. 1 week after formal mating it came. A diplomatic summit, dozens of packs, hundreds of wolves at Obsidian Fortress, negotiating trade and boundaries. Sarah was leading a session on Omega advocacy reforms. The attack was sophisticated. 5 operatives, former military-enhanced capabilities, clearly trained for this specific mission. They breached security during session changeover, when crowds moved between venues and guard positions were temporarily exposed. Their target was Sarah specifically, but they made one critical miscalculation. They assumed she was a political target who'd panic under fire. Sarah's training activated instantly. 3 seconds to assess 5 hostiles, 2 exits blocked 18 civilians in danger. Her mind cataloged cover-calculated responses identified nearest hostile as primary threat. She moved. The first attacker went down to perfectly executed technique, redirecting momentum using size against him, targeting knee with devastating precision. He dropped hard tactical advantage, eliminated before he understood what happened. The second hesitated, surprised by competent resistance. That hesitation cost him when Elena materialized with her combat knife, engaging with brutal efficiency. Together, they held the line 47 seconds. Long enough for Mate Bond to alert the Trinity, long enough for security protocols, long enough for overwhelming force. Remaining 3 attackers were neutralized within minutes, captured alive, thanks to Sarah's tactical decision to disable rather than kill. Dead men couldn't provide intelligence. When chaos settled, Sarah stood over downed attackers with Elena both breathing hard, but uninjured. Civilians were shaken, but safe. Mission success despite terrible odds. Grayson reached her first hands, checking for injuries with frantic precision. "Are you hurt?" "Any wounds, I'm fine," Sarah said, though hands trembled as adrenaline wore off. They didn't account for me actually knowing how to fight. Tactical error on their part. Kane's expression held savage pride. "You held defensive position against 5 trained operators for 47 seconds. That's not just knowing how to fight, that's combat effectiveness. Well done." The captured attackers broke under Ashton's interrogation within hours. Not from physical torture, psychological pressure by expert intelligence operative was far more effective. Ironwood's entire network spilled out. Communication protocols, financial backers, long-term plans, safe houses, assets positioned across territories. 5 years of network building exposed because operatives panicked when their supposedly easy target fought back. Ashton displayed intelligence in war room mapping connections, painting picture of conspiracy more extensive than suspected. He's been playing 5-year game, building infrastructure for coup attempt that would have destabilized entire northern territories. This assassination wasn't meant to succeed, it was meant to create chaos he could exploit. But because you fought back, his operatives revealed information they were supposed to protect unto death. Kane studied network map. We've got his entire operation mapped. Every asset, every communication channel, every financial connection. Time to roll it up. Not yet, as Sarah interjected. Everyone looks surprised. If we move now, we capture his network, but he escapes. He's too smart to be directly connected, probably has multiple cutout layers. We'll disrupt this network, but he'll rebuild and try again in 5 years. She moved to display highlighting patterns. We need him to commit personally. Make him think his operation partially succeeded, that I'm injured vulnerable, that you 3 are distracted. He'll see opening for decisive strike, but this time we control the entire battlefield. Grayson studied her with respect. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use carefully constructed intelligence as bait. Sarah corrected. We leak false medical reports through channels Ironwood monitors. Create apparent security vulnerabilities. Make him think he's finally got opening. Then we springtrap with overwhelming force. It's dangerous, Ashton said. If he commits and something goes wrong, then we adapt. Sarah interrupted. That's what tactical operations are, controlled risk with contingency planning. My father taught me battles are won by forcing enemy to fight on ground you've chosen. This is choosing ground. A single look coordinated their response. We do it, Grayson said decisively. But we build redundancy into every layer. Multiple extraction plans. Overwhelming force staged within seconds. This operation has zero acceptable casualty rate, especially not you. The trap took 2 weeks to construct. False intelligence carefully fed through compromised channels. Medical reports suggesting Sarah was recovering from injuries that didn't exist. Security protocols apparently exposed. Every detail designed to look like genuine vulnerability. Ironwood took it. His second operation was larger, better coordinated, full assault team intending to extract or eliminate Sarah, while Trinity was supposedly away handling outlying crisis. Except Trinity wasn't away. Sarah wasn't vulnerable. And every step of Ironwood's team was monitored from moment they crossed into territory. They walked into Fortress, where every corridor was covered by overlapping fields of fire, every exit controlled, every movement tracked. The assault team never reached their target, captured alive within minutes by overwhelming force, giving no opportunity to fight or flee. Ironwood himself was taken trying to flee through route he'd apparently prepared years ago. Ashton's intelligence network had identified it weeks earlier, positioned assets to intercept, waited patiently for this mistake. The trial was methodical and devastating. 3 days of public proceedings where every piece of evidence was laid out. Communications decoded, financial transactions traced, testimony from captured operatives detailing 5 years of conspiracy. Ironwood's defense crumbled under proof so overwhelming even his sympathizers couldn't maintain support. When sentencing recommendations were requested, Grayson gave Sarah the choice gesture demonstrating her equal authority. Exile, Sarah decided after consideration. Stripped of all rank, forbidden from entering any Trinity territory. Execution would make him martyr. Exile makes him example. Ambition without honor leads to nothing but loss. Some questioned whether exile was sufficient, but Sarah's reasoning was tactically sound, and Trinity supported her judgment. As Ironwood was escorted from territory, he paused beside Sarah with bitter hatred. You think you've won, girl. You're still just playing at being queen. No, Sarah said calmly. I'm a soldier who successfully completed a mission. There's a difference. The trial's conclusion marked the end of Trinity's first major internal threat, but not the end of challenges. Ironwood's exile left power vacuums. Sarah helped fill through reformed governance, transparent resource allocation, genuine partnership between large packs and small. The work was never-ending. New crises emerged as old ones were resolved, but they faced each challenge together, building something that grew stronger under pressure. 10 years passed, a decade that saw Northern Territories flourish under collaborative leadership, combining strategic oversight with ground-level understanding. Sarah's influence marked every reform, every policy shift, every strengthened protection for vulnerable pack members. The territorial dispute resolution model she'd pioneered, exhaustive research, specialist consultation, transparent decision-making, had become standard practice. The operational partnership framework allowed smaller packs genuine voice without sacrificing strategic coordination. She'd borne 4 children during those years, each carrying traits from all 4 parents in ways geneticists found fascinating. Lyra, eldest at 10, had inherited Grayson's strategic mind, organizing tactical games, teaching siblings pattern recognition. Rowan, 7, possessed Ashton's analytical gifts, preferring to observe and document. The twins Marcus and Sage, 5 years old, showed Kane's warrior instincts combined with Sarah's stubborn independence, a combination promising interesting teenage years. They were being raised to think tactically, to lead through partnership, to understand real power came from making everyone stronger. Moonstone Pack had tripled in size, transformed from vulnerable border pack to thriving community. Weekly visits Sarah had negotiated evolved into genuine integration. Her pack understanding she was both their daughter and their queen. Elena had risen to commander of Royal Guard, her loyalty and combat prowess, earning command of elite unit protecting Trinity's family. She'd found her own mate 5 years ago, gentle beta male, who didn't mind. His wife was one of the most dangerous wolves in territory. On 10th anniversary of her mating, Sarah stood on palace balcony with her 3 mates looking out over kingdom they'd built. Their children played in gardens below Lyra, organizing siblings into formations suggesting future command capability. In territories beyond an Omega refused unwanted mate, protected by laws Sarah had strengthened. A small pack received medical supplies, preventing outbreak resources allocated through systems Sarah designed. A young Alpha consulted specialist before territorial decisions following models Sarah pioneered after her costly mistake. Changes that couldn't be measured in dramatic battles, but in thousands of quiet moments, where wolves live safer, freer, more dignified lives because four people chose partnership over domination. I still remember that night 10 years ago, Sarah said thoughtfully. How terrified I was. How certain accepting mate bonds meant losing myself. I thought it would destroy everything I'd worked for. She turned to face Grayson Ashton and Kane, seeing love that had only deepened over a decade of building something meaningful. But I was wrong. You didn't take anything. You gave me everything, a purpose larger than I'd imagined, power to make real changes, a family that expanded beyond what I'd dared to dream. We didn't save you, Grayson corrected, gently pulling her close. We found you. There's a difference. You were already everything you needed to be. We just gave you platform to show the world what we already saw. And you've spent every day since proving the goddess knew exactly what she was doing, binding us together. Ashton's arms joined Grayson's, then Kane's, all three surrounding her in formation that had become second nature. No regrets, Kane asked, rough voice carrying genuine question rather than certainty. Sarah looked at her mates, at her children playing below, at kingdom they'd built through strategy and stubbornness, and love that only grew stronger under pressure. Not a single one of them. This is exactly where I was meant to be. And for the first time since that terrifying night 10 years ago, she meant it without reservation. The story of the Omega who walked into Obsidian Fortress expecting simple ceremony and walked out as queen had become legend across territories. Young wolves heard it and understood that destiny didn't always look like what you planned, but sometimes it gave you exactly what you needed, even when you didn't know you needed it. Below them, their children's laughter rang out. The future of Northern Territories being raised by parents who'd proven that strength came not from dominance, but from partnership, forged in mutual respect and tested through genuine challenge. Trinity had found their queen. Sarah Moonstone had found three mates she'd never known she needed. And together they'd built something extraordinary. A legacy that would endure not through conquest or control, but through thousands of quiet decisions that made life better for every wolf under their protection. This was leadership. This was partnership. This was what happened when four people chose to build together rather than rule alone. And it was only the beginning.